Hey everyone, hope you're getting ready for a great and safe holiday season, or perhaps you're in the midst of one already. This video is a re-upload. I originally took it down as it contained stories from 4chan, and as such you can't really find the original author of 4chan stories due to how 4chan itself functions. But now I've decided to publish it again anyway, because these stories are part of our modern folklore, and I want to keep that alive. Enjoy this while I attempt to get back on a frequent upload schedule. Let me know in the comments what you plan on doing this holiday season, and let me know what topics you want to hear next. Thank you, and never forget, this world is a strange one. The Lost Hiker, from an anonymous 4chan user. I'm a forest ranger for a large amount of dense wooded forest just north of the US border. At 1200 hours one day, I just signed on to my shift. I got a call on the radio for a 1049, which is a missing person in my area. Apparently, they were last seen wearing a sweatshirt, hiking shorts, and a red backpack. They had been missing for 2 days now, but was just now reported. I mount up, fuel up, and head out onto the area he was last known to be. I cruised for about an hour and a half, then decided it would be a good idea to start out on foot, as he wouldn't be on any service roads, otherwise I would have seen him by now, surely. But first I made sure to notify dispatch to send an additional unit. I waited for half an hour until backup arrived. The guy who showed up was a good guy, and I enjoyed working with him. So we headed up onto a trail that's known for people getting lost, a bit of a hotspot if you will, because halfway up it splits and goes further into the woods instead of curving around and heading back toward the service area. People get confused here, often thinking that it will lead back when it doesn't, but usually they make it back or we find them. We hike in for about an hour calling out the person's name, keeping an eye out for clues or signs. I wind around a bend and find the remnants of a campsite. I shout out for my partner to come over, then start shouting for the missing gentleman again. My partner doesn't come though. I go back around the corner and now my partner isn't there. I try the radio.
Come in. Officer, are you code 4?
I wait a minute for a reply, but there is none. Well, crap, I think. I begin to inspect the campsite. It's fairly recent, within a week, I think. But there are no new footprints or indents in the mud surrounding the fire pit, except what appears to be from animals. I decide to wait for my partner to come back. He may have gotten lost himself. I try the radio again after a while.
Officer, come in. Are you code 4?
Again, there's no response. I begin to look around the trees, listening for any sounds out of the ordinary. I wait for maybe another 45 minutes for my partner, while walking in a little circle around the campsite, but my partner still doesn't show up. Of course, I'm beginning to get worried. I go back around the bend in the trail, past a little rock outcropping. I head back the way we came in, and I'm looking for any sign of my partner now. As I come up onto the trail, I hear footsteps up ahead of me, boots on a rocky path. I immediately go to my radio and try again.
Officer, are you code 4?
But still nothing, so I run up ahead to get a good look at whoever is on the trail. There's a guy with a red backpack. He seems to be walking strangely, no swing to his arms when he goes, kinda like you would do if you were pretending to be a robot. Excuse me, sir, what's your name? I'm 20 feet behind him by this point. Sir. He seems to be ignoring me, still walking weird like that. Hey! He finally stops and turns around lightning fast. It kind of startles me. I ask him if he's the person we've been looking for, but instead of replying audibly, he just stares at me. I say it again, asking if he has the same name as the person we're looking for, but he still doesn't speak. He does nod his head though, slowly. I'm relieved. We've been looking for you. Let's head back to the trailhead. Another 40 minutes go by and he's oddly quiet. We reach the trailhead. Mine and my partner's vehicles are still there. Now, I'm going to put you in the back of my truck. You're not under arrest. Just relax and catch your breath, okay? Once he's back there, I go to the radio and I try again, calling for the other officer. But this time, a reply crackles to life through the speaker.
This is Officer such and such. Yeah, I'm fine. Found the missing person. But he's got a broken leg after falling off a small cliff. I've patched him up. We're on our way back to the trailhead. Sorry for not responding, I was out of range. Got separated at one of the trail forks.
What? I remember thinking. I reply, that can't be right. I've got the missing hiker. He's in the back of my truck right now. There's silence for a couple of minutes before he comes back.
Lock the truck and grab the 12 gauge from my Jeep.
Why? I ask.
Just do it, and don't let him out of your sight.
All right then. I unlock his Jeep and grab the 12 gauge, inspecting it to see if there's a round in the chamber. I calmly walk over to the truck and peek in through the window. But the man I'd just put in there is gone, and the cage that surrounds the back seat was severely damaged and bent, and the driver's side door is open. I swing around the other side of my truck and peer into the cab, but there's no one there. I close the door and climb into the bed, sitting on the roof for the hour and a half, ready to see anything and anyone, and utterly terrified. Until finally my partner comes back with the injured hiker. He looks at me. You let it go? What do you mean by it? I ask. But he just gives me a passing, I'll tell you later. He never did tell me after we got back to the station, even if I was dying inside to know what he was talking about. I would later talk to that partner as we were both on the same service road again one day and assigned to the same area. I asked him about that odd incident a few months back. I had pulled up next to his Jeep as he was filling out some paperwork. Hey, how's the shift so far? A couple of idiot kids decided to get drunk out there, some of them even going at it, if you know what I mean. But nothing too serious, he answers. So, about that incident we had a month ago. I've been trying to figure it out and it just keeps confusing me. You never really told me what it was, or why you had me lock my truck and grab a 12 gauge. He clicks his pen frantically all of a sudden, then puts it back in his pocket, closing his citation book. Well, it's not something that you need to know about. It'd be in your best interest to keep your nose clean of it from now on. You got it? Come on, dude. Don't scare me with that G-Man secret agent bullcrap. Just explain what you thought it was. He looks at me solemnly from just below the brim of his ball cap. After a long silence, he speaks. It's been here longer than before I took this job. I used to live around these parts, and at night I'd always hear my neighbors' voices calling my name, or the family dog barking, when the dog was on my bed. Now I was interested. But dispatch suddenly interrupted us with a report about kids firing pellets at animals. And when we were done with that, there was a call about someone breaking their leg. Then I had to patrol campgrounds and hiking trails. I was just too busy to get any more out of him. So that's all I was able to get. But if I see him again, I'll keep asking. Because otherwise, I'm going to go crazy with curiosity and maybe fear. What kind of bear was that? From an anonymous 4chan user. So I was hiking the Pacific Coast Trail this last week. heading south towards Crater Lake near Lake Maidu. As I cut across one of the other trails, a couple of Forest Service guys hike up from the east. One is clearly an LEO in full kit with an AR-10. The other guy isn't LEO, but he's got a rucksack covered in smoke canisters and carrying a massive saw with teeth an inch deep. An odd sight to say the least. As we're about to pass each other, they stop me. They ask me how I'm doing, and then they ask me if I had seen anything odd around here. I tell them I'm just hiking the Pacific Coast Trail and admit that I haven't seen anything weird of note lately. But I ask them why they ask that. They say something about a problem bear near one of the upper lakes that they'd been chasing off with pepper grenades and to watch out since I'm alone out here. I shrug and thank them for the info as I keep hiking. I set up my camp a mile or so down the trail. A bit after dark, I hear these shots ring out. They're coming from the west. All night, every couple of hours, I hear these shots, slowly circling around along the west to the south. I don't get any sleep. A bit before dawn, I hear another volley of shots and a horrendous noise to the east. Honestly sounded like a pig getting stuck, a really big one. The noise stops a bit after dawn. I climb out of my tent and begin to pack, then I start hiking south. I can smell this disgusting smelling smoke, like half-rotted meat and copper blowing in from the south. The two Forest Service guys wander up from the east. The LEO's pack is significantly lighter than before. The guy with the saw has one smoke grenade left, and the saw is now covered with black liquid. I ask what the heck was going on all night, but the guy with the saw just gives me this smug grin, then says, "A bear." The LEO nods in affirmation and adds, "It was just a bear. Don't worry about it, we took care of it." They're giving me no F's about the smell or the black crap on the saw that looked like it was smoldering. They asked me if I needed anything and then wished me luck on the rest of my hike. I couldn't get any good sleep for the rest of the trip though. What on earth were they hunting out there, and why couldn't they be honest about it? It was very odd. The Kid, from an anonymous 4chan user. I was going camping with this group of about 10 to 15 people for some voluntary Forest Service and ranger work. There were only 4 other people around my age though. The rest were either really young, around 13 to 15, or in their late 40s. The 4 others I was with were pretty good friends of mine. We usually didn't get much sleep whenever we were spending a weekend together. The trip lasted for 3 days. It was spring break, and I hadn't slept the night before, but I was used to going on no to little sleep, so I had no problem when one of our 4 suggested that we go on a hike. We decided to go pretty late at night so none of the youngsters would follow us in. Unfortunately, our plan did not work, so we ended up with an entire pack of teenagers following us. We had an obligation to watch them too, because 3/5 of us were volunteers. We really didn't have a choice now that they were with us. That being said, we decided to make it short. We would take them on a pretty rough hike so they wouldn't come with us whenever we went hiking the next time. This ended up being a bad idea. We got split up into several groups. I stayed with one group with one of my friends. We had decided to go down a trail where we had spotted some deer earlier. A deer ended up scaring one of the girls who screamed at the top of her lungs and was being skittish about everything out there. It was kind of irritating. Needless to say, the hike was ruined. We ended up quite far from the camp, and while there were a bunch of annoying teens with us, we were convinced that one of the kids from the other group was in the forest trying to scare us, because several points during the night we heard rustling all around us and we kept hearing this same eerie scream deep in the woods, which sounded like the girl who screamed earlier about the deer. Just like it. Anyway, we got back to camp and told the kids to shut up and go to bed. They were being loud the entire hike and I was done dealing with it. We all set up base next to this trail that led into the woods. We stayed there for several hours before morning, and none of us were able to sleep. When the big guy who left to hunt some deer joined us, I began discussing with him how the deer seemed abnormally large out here. He turned to me with a serious look on his face and said, "Those weren't deer. I almost got right next to one, and all I could see were its eyes, and it wasn't moving. It was almost as big as me." Now keep in mind, this guy was about 6'7", and he's one of those heavy-set guys who looks like he could kill a man with one punch, and he seemed very spooked about this. I thought he was just messing around with me, so I dismissed it. Fast forward to the next night. The previous hike took too much of a toll on the teens, save two of them. One of them was this loud chick, and I didn't mind having her around as much as the other kid. The other was a complete idiot. He was loud, annoying, and had a sense of humor equivalent to that unfunny eel meme. He tried making jokes every minute. There was never a moment of silence with this kid. This time only the big guy and the two teens were with us. We decided to go see some sights this time. Apparently, when a few of them had gone camping before, they had found this secret room next to an old fort-type building. While we were headed for that room, the idiot kid got separated from us somehow. Don't ask. He seemed to just wander off with his flashlight. We ended up finding him, and he got scolded for being stupid and wandering off at 1 a.m. when he didn't know the area. Instead of being whiny like he usually was, he stayed completely silent. In fact, he seemed to just stare off in a daze. At this point, we hadn't slept for 2 days, and for me, I was going on 3. I chalked it all up to him being tired and not being able to handle the hike. Later on, I would find out that the kid had slept the night before, because I saw him go into his tent and crash with most of the teenagers. The other girl hadn't, however, so we go back to the fort and head up to the top room, and the chick decided to have a nap there. But the whole way back, that dumb kid was walking really awkwardly. He looked like a freaking baby horse. Not to mention he was being completely silent and still on some occasions. One of us had to walk behind him to make sure he didn't fall over onto rocks. Anyway, when we got to that top room and the chick fell asleep, the kid laid down and fell asleep immediately after. We didn't mind. They were 13 and 14 and they couldn't handle it as well as we could. The rest of us entertained ourselves by making shadow puppets for 2 hours. At the end of it, we were all kind of dozing off by then. We were all quite sleep-deprived. But I was the most alert out of the group, probably because I was still sitting up and trying to keep watch. At about 3 a.m., the kid stands up out of nowhere, and the other guys snap out of it because we're thinking, the heck is he doing now? He starts stumbling toward me in this awkward, jerky movement fashion, and I'm standing there thinking he's going to freaking fall on me. So I tell him to sit back down. Then the others join in and command him to do as I said. At this point, he starts twitching backwards, and there's a ledge not too far from him. We're yelling at him to sit down because he could fall off. The big guy friend of mine is about to stand up, and so am I, so that this kid doesn't hurt himself. But then he starts whimpering like he's trying to talk, and I have no idea what the kid is trying to say. And then his voice doesn't sound normal at all. He collapses back down and just goes right back to sleep. Utterly confused, we tried to not think about it. We were tired after all, so we decided to go back to camp then. So we wake up the girl and say it's time to go. As we try to wake the kid up though, he won't budge. My first thought is he's unconscious, like had fainted instead of falling asleep. But the big guy tries picking him up, and he ends up standing up on his own then. But still, he's not moving normally. So the big guy has to pretty much carry the tired boy back down, along with his bag, all the way to the truck we came in. It wasn't too far. The rest of us got our stuff and we got in. Now, when the kid tries to get in the truck, he twitches backward before getting in. It was at this point that I noticed that he was really bruised up. Not on his head much, just on his arms. He didn't have those bruises the night before. He's still being quiet, so I checked his forehead to make sure he didn't have a fever. Plus, I was sure that he hadn't done any sort of substance, because the program we were volunteering on is one of those churchy, drug-free programs, so I have no idea what the heck was wrong with him. When we get back to camp, he gets out, leaves his bag and his flashlight, which was weird, because he was being so pissy before about anyone touching his stuff. He goes off toward the edge of the campsite. His tent wasn't over there though. But we don't care at this point because we think he's probably just taking a piss or something. And back at the site, after all, he's not our responsibility anymore. Everyone else goes to sleep, but me and the big guy stay awake for a bit, discussing what happened with the weird kid. As we were discussing it and analyzing the situation, it just got more and more eerie. And at one point he mentioned that while the kid was standing up, all the crickets and crap would go quiet in the background. I hadn't noticed at the time. We decided to keep watch though, as we hadn't seen any sign of the kid coming back yet. About half an hour later, he decided that he needed his phone to keep track of the time, and I needed a pee break, so we left our watch. He took my flashlight because it was brighter than his, and I took the kid's flashlight because I wasn't going that far. Before we went our separate ways, he set his flashlight down on the bed of our friend's truck. As I headed back though, I saw a few flashes from what I thought was my flashlight, and it was just some flickering like someone was turning it on and off. It was him signaling me where he was. So we sat back down and resumed our watch. Barely even a few minutes later, he realized that his flashlight was missing. We searched for it and turned up with nothing. I told him to use my flashlight then, but we were both pretty alert at this point. 10 minutes later, his dog, which he left at the campsite while we were hiking, lifts up his head and starts growling at the woods. I'm watching that side because we were both keeping an eye on each other's blind sides. When I look over to where the dog was growling, I see flickering in the woods. These woods are about 50 feet from our current location, so I let him know about it. Now we're both staring at this flickering in the woods, and we realize that it looks similar to the beam of his flashlight, and it's going on and off like it was signaling us. I then realized that the forest was silent again. We just sat there and watched it, because screw investigating something weird like that. It stopped 15 minutes later. A while after that, my friend decided that he needed to get some sleep, because he would be driving back the next day, and I said all right and bid him good night. I was going to stay up and patrol a bit, so I do. It was cold as heck out there though, and I was armed with nothing but a flashlight and a small axe. By 4:50 a.m., nothing else had happened, but it wasn't until the next day that the idiot kid came back. He hadn't come from his tent either. He just walked right out of the woods, as if he'd been there all night, doing God knows what. Someone told him to get in one of the cars, and he just went in and sat there, while some other people had to pack up his stuff for him. No one else seemed to notice his weird speaking, because everyone was busy packing their stuff and loading it up. When we got back, I headed home immediately to shower and get some sleep. The next time I would go back for more volunteer work, the kid wasn't there. And the thing was, ever since I'd started volunteering there, the kid was there. The kid had always attended, but not this time, and not one time since. I have no idea what happened to him out in those woods, but I have a feeling that the kid that came out of that forest was not the same kid that went in. Ranger, from Liam. I worked for the Colorado Rangers as a seasonal ranger, and I took my job quite seriously. I had done this many times before, and it was a good way to enjoy the place and the nature around here. I worked around the Rocky Mountain area. Well, it was a cool summer night, and we had a call about some fireworks around the west. I set out and expected for it to just be some kids messing around, but I was wrong, and my life was about to change for the worse. I made it to the campsite, but it was empty by the time I arrived. I looked around the area but could see nothing. Just when I was about to leave, I heard footsteps behind me. I could tell that whoever it was, they were trying to stay hidden. I turned around quickly but saw no one. I began to walk away again. As I'm walking up the small trail, I catch someone in the corner of my eye. I still remember the haunting image in my head. I turn only to see a dark figure that I could only barely make out. The guy was in a hockey mask, wearing a brown coat with a great big axe lifted over his head. After about 10 seconds of a stare-off, he pulled it back further and began to run at me. This guy was about 6'4" and I'm 5'11". Scared, I quickly pulled my pistol, and with one loud bang, he fell over, lifeless, with a wound in his head. I had killed a man. Turns out this may have been a prank. His family was upset and pressed charges, but I got off as it was obviously self-defense. I don't think the kid knew that forest rangers are officially law enforcement and carry weapons. Besides, you shouldn't be playing those types of pranks on people. If you do, you should know that this might happen.